Hi, I'm Amy, the poetry editor, and we're here tonight to launch the wonderful book by Carolyn Jess-Cooke, new book. Yay, we need to leave the earth. But we also have a couple of special guest poets tonight, and we'll have a little bit of a running order. We'll have Jen Hadfield first, and then we'll have Carolyn and a few questions, and then we'll have Liz Berry to finish off. So we'll begin with Jen Hadfield. Jen. Right, Jen Hadfield lives in the Shetlands. Her first collection, Almanacs, won an Eric Gregory Award in 2003. Her second collection, 90 Place, won the T.S. Eliot Prize and was shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best Collection. She won the Edwin Morgan Poetry Competition in 2012, and her most recent collection, Stone Age, was published in 2021. Welcome, Jen Hadfield, and we'll look forward to hearing some of your poems.
Thank you, Amy. Granny whose gaze. Granny whose gaze was very much the moon half full is in her green coat in the Hollywood. Granny whose gaze was very much the moon half full is not far off, second rung of a step ladder up in the boughs of the baking apple tree. Her gaze dwindling through its last quarter, Granny declared with unusual apology, I don't like to see the new moon through glass. At least, I tend to think it's unlucky for me. Turning from her reflection in her clear dusk cardigan, because she couldn't abide to be idle, and so prized the days she got a lot done. So all of the poems in the Stone Age, I think all of them are about us and the different ways that we understand each other and the ways that we fail to understand each other as well. And sometimes as well, they're about our attempts to understand possible other consciousnesses beyond the human. So there's a lot about communication and language in here. And the next poem is called Gaelic. It's not really about Gaelic, but it is written for a Gaelic speaking friend of mine. Gaelic. It's not okay to rub your head against air like a cat. It's not okay to be too sincere. I know you can tell I'm cribbing as I go. And when I ask, what would you say is your mother tongue? I'm the last surviving speaker of my language. But when I'm fully exhausted of conjugating feeling, parsing silence between speaker and listener, and remembering to ask questions direct, but not too direct, and pausing to really hear the answer, and hearing you, really hearing you, but under the ribs sensing slack water. It does sometimes happen I let an oar drop. I know how it looks, and I see your shock. Like you saw a face through a dark river. To you, I'm suddenly speaking Gaelic, like language translated into slow light and swift dark. And this is another poem for a friend. There's a lot of poems to and for friends in this book. Sometimes because you need a poem to say things to people. So it's called Midwife, and it's for a friend who's a midwife or used to be a midwife. And about sensitivity as well, and folk that can sense more than most of us, although I guess none of us really know what everyone else is sensing. Midwife. All night Meg looks after newborns. Her shift is full of first this and first that. Corkscrewing into her pupil's soil, a child's first gaze takes thistly root. She hurries him to his drugged mother. Meg creeps in at 8, and then the flat is ward quiet. Floorboards squealing, and latches that click like toes, the little groan of the kitchen door, and high above the range of human hearing, damp pants on the pulley, pleepsing like bats. So Meg is awake again in no time at all, bearing her ribcage high like a lantern, and a moth flitters round it, the colour of fur, skimming over floorboards like a person who's learnt to walk on fire. Skunk cabbage. I have no idea where I comes to an end. Perhaps in walls I frantically throw up, hands flattering like birds between the stones, or in skin touchy as an electric fence. And when you cross this moat of oily water to plant your foot on the welcome mat of my liver, I burp out the naked truth like a novelty doorbell, or something spouting from a vegetal gland, a rattlesnake pistol, waxy white, sheathed in a fountain of indigenous leaves. I can't change my mind about what I'm reading because I've sent a text over. I'm a very last minute person with poetry readings. I can go with what's on the list, definitely. I don't know if everyone here knows what a nudibranch is. You can see it written up there on the screen. So I'll give you a quick précis of nudibranchs. It's a marine animal, a sea slug, but if you call them sea slugs, they don't sound as beautiful as they are. And you get them all over the world in all kinds of spectacular colors. It's like a shellless snail, but they've got all kinds of superpowers. Some of them capture the toxins from their prey and then store it at the tips of their own sparkly, beautiful tentacles so they can sting other creatures. But the sea hare that I'm imagining in this poem is much more of a master of camouflage, and it's a beautiful kind of rich mottly brown color, and looks quite a lot like a hare actually. So this is a shape-shifting poem and a poem about skinny dipping in a Shetland rock pool all at the same time. Nudibranch. I ease my naked body down into the rock pool's closet, clinging to the vertical rocks with my soles, hanging a moment before I let myself fall. Slowly as a dim slip that shrugs off its hanger in a deep green changing room, air shouting silently from my struck lungs, I would try on the old clothes to see if they still fit. Dropping to the velveted floor, the seizing onesie of Brillo hair, the sweat sheath that horripilates with urchinous buttons, each breaking wave dousing me of costume, comfortably divested of my name. Perhaps still some permeable notion of self, arabesques of albumen, prongs subliming to tender flame condensing down the antlers, and weed, and warm, and warm, and weed. And I'm just gonna finish up with Oh Yay. One of those inexplicable poems, which for me are the ones I always want to read, the ones I didn't see coming and wrote in one go without taking breath. Oh yay. It always seems like you shout your feelings like a town crier. And I proclaim my feelings like a town crier. And folk don't so much share as ring out their feelings like crowds of town criers, turning this way and that, throwing their chins to the sky to toll with a strong downward clang the feelings, summons we perpetually serve on each other. As if at the edict of some abdicating king, perhaps a stark bollock naked one, his lieutenant standing nude in the king's name too, armistice and christening, the alarum peal, I feel, I feel, I feel, I feel. So I'd just like to say congratulations, Caroline, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your poems. Thanks for having me along.
Oh, thank you so much, Jen. That was so brilliant. I sort of feel like I could just ask you to keep reading.
So brilliant. Thank you, Jen. Pleepsing. That's my new word of the moment. It's a fantastic word, that is. Thank you so much. Those poems were all in your new book, The Stone Age, yes? Okay, fabulous. Wonderful. Thank you. Next, Caroline. Yay. Caroline's new book. What can we say about Caroline? We can say a lot about Caroline. She's my favorite multitasking author. She's always up to a lot of things. She's a reader in creative writing at Glasgow University. She's a novelist published in 23 languages. She's an editor and she's a prize-winning poet. And here are some of her wonderful books. Here is her first book, Inroads. Beautiful. Here is her second book, Boom, Poems about Motherhood. And here is a beautiful book she edited called Writing Motherhood with lots of poems about motherhood. Yay. And her most recent book, which she will be reading from us today, We Have to. I'll have a few questions after she finishes reading. But welcome, Caroline, and please read from your new book for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. So I'm going to try and share my screen and find the poem that I'm going to begin with, which is going to require a wee bit of scrolling. So excuse me 1 minute. Oh, there we go. Can everyone see that? It should say 1 day old. Yeah. 1 day old, 6:03 a.m. Let us stay beneath the covers and hold each other close while the dark taps its foot by the bedside, while the rain knocks at the window, pleading to come in. When you blow out 7 candles, the ocean will swell and all the polar bears will be gone. When you are 20, 150 million of us will have no homes. There will be no towns, no schools, no warm beds in which to hold each other in the still, sure light. We will leave this planet for another, ascending into the billion galaxies, ribboning above. This blue earth wrapped in a blanket we made, its million tears and frays in need of mending. I have brought you to a world riven by consequence. Let us remain in this small place a while longer, push back the unknown night that waits, wanting to come in. And I've got a sequence of poems at the beginning called Songs for the Arctic. And I'm going to read, which one should I choose? We Two Flicker Briefly, which is right here. And I can talk a little bit about this element of the book, maybe when we have a chat, Amy. We Two Flicker Briefly. December, bone sky. Oceans oil dark, cloth, unsettled by a new burden. Boat skirted with white mountains of many quarries and quifs. We watch for green sky rivers, arrows of geese, water scythes of whales, to subtitle this most unearthly of Earth's scapes, to reassure that we too can pass gently through. And the next poem is The Queen Aboard the Oosberg, which is actually in Oslo. I don't know if you've ever been, if anyone's been to Oslo, but at the museum there, the Viking Museum, which is just fantastic. There's artifacts from a ship, the Oosberg, that was dug up, And they found inside it was a woman, a queen, and another woman tucked up in bed. And that was how she was buried, with various artifacts to prepare her for the next life. The queen aboard the Oosberg, return her to that flame ocean beneath earth to continue her journey. But first, lay her in bed. Prepare the best linens and tuck her in, for she is merely asleep, asleep in dreams, rocked by death's waves. Ready the sleighs, the oxen, her dogs, the stove, the plough. In this new life, she may wish to reap and cook, leave nothing of use behind. Seam the helm in clay, the dragon-necked bow and stilled oars, womb tight. Bury them all and pray a fair wind. This book is sort of a collection of obsessions over the last 7 years. So I became very obsessed with ice because I went to the Arctic a few times, and this book is one of the themes is climate change, and I sort of became obsessed with researching ice and glaciers and ice shelves. So this one's called The Story of Ice. Before film, there was ice, luring the relic of a moment into its press. Before feathers and fur, there was ice, its shameless plumage, its down and pinion, its stupendous mane and slap-cold fleece. Before bricks and mortar, there was ice, hotels and cottages, crofts, brocks, teepees, yaodongs, fabulous ice yurts. Before the rainbow, there was ice, its spectrum of aluminium, gold, cerulean, chartreuse, even blood. Before the body, there was ice, vena cava, tunica, media alveolar, aortic, femur, sacrum, deltoid, twinkling astral womb. Before desire, there was ice, crushing on every sunset, drinking in every cloud, holding on to each drop of rain like a love letter or a kiss it wants to taste again and again. Before literature, there was ice, publishing wind's poems, ocean's Gothic novels, flash fiction of the forests, memoir of an ice age reprinted. Before story, there was ice, Earth's archive, museum of existence. In the first act, there was ice. In the second act, there was ice. And in the end, there will be ice. And then the next poem is the title poem. If I can find it. Bear with me. Here we go. We have to leave the earth. And this is one of those poems that sort of came out in one go. I think a lot of poetry is done in your mind, or at least that's how it feels for me. Or it's been circulating and percolating for a long time, and then it sort of just comes out in one drop. We have to leave the earth. He buried the letter in a forest near Auschwitz, where it hibernated for 40 winters, ampersands of his hand, dormant as field mice. And for all he knew, the letter would never be found. Snows might drink the ink, or the ground swallow it as a grave. But the urge to bear witness moved him past consequence of being found to speak of what he had said to those he led to the gas chambers, that they were not here to be bathed as they'd been told. We are still in that place, being moved past consequence or to death, or to witness the taking of what is not owed. We have not passed the urge to obliterate the other. We have to leave the earth because we know too many ways to destroy her. We have to write these things. We have to tell them to the forest and the watchful snows. There's a sequence of poems as well about one of my children's autism diagnosis, which was very out of the blue. And it was at a time that I didn't really know very much about autism at all. And so I had to, I guess there's a huge learning curve, and it felt very much as though a lot of the things that I had planned or just taken for granted for her were suddenly turned upside down. So this poem is called Erasing the Petroglyphs. After the diagnosis, I retraced my steps to the cave where my wishes for her future were symbolically sung in rock. I scraped the blade across each abrading until the stone was unsewn, newly hewn, and pause in the earth dark for glyphs to emerge not of my hand. And then I'll read a couple of poems from a sequence of 9 poems. Well, this sequence is called The House of Rest, and I'll just scroll down to it. This is I guess I've called it a history in 9 poems of Josephine Butler, who pioneered feminist activism. She was a 19th century social activist, and she risked a huge amount to campaign for the repeal of the Contagious Diseases Act, which really placed entire blame on women for the spread of venereal diseases in port towns where sailors would dock up. There was venereal diseases, but they made it law that any woman or girl over the age of 13 could be checked at any time to see if she had venereal disease. But this was abhorrent. So one of the things that she did as well was she was motivated by the death of her daughter, actually, to campaign for justice for these women, because she was a woman of means, but she really was appalled by the sort of lack of options, shall we say, that women of the lower classes had, which pushed a lot of them into prostitution. And she took some prostitutes in to live with her, but this, ruined her reputation and, was scandalous. But she was quite a figure, and I just, the more I would read about her, I just can't fathom that we don't know more about her. So this is a poem called Eva. Then you were here, real as a wound. They placed you in my arms with such care. I thought you a parcel of feathers that might fly away. I stroked your face. Your eyes were midnight blue. Time bended to you. Language restrung its instruments to sound your name. Visitors admired your lace ears, your peony fists, but they could not see you as I did. You slid from your skin just as you had slipped out of me and become a shard of morning light, turning cobwebs to crystal thread, the windowsill a gold bar, dew on hedges, constellations of delicacy. I knew then this love was alchemy. Our bond is not made of that loose, wet rope they cut, but of instruments that show the unseen and sound the silent, the heart's infinite missions harnessed in flight. I'll read just two more poems. This is Picking Oakum. Picking Oakum. The matron shoves me into one of the ramshackle huts out with the workhouse, her hands trembling as she turns the key in the lock. I expect to find a pride of lions inside, or perhaps wolves, but the hollow eyes watching me belong to women. Filthy, yes, filmed in soot and lice and sadness, but women nonetheless. A dozen clasped by the foul shed with only two windows, a leaky roof, and reams of old rope coiled on the floor like black serpents. My hands are clasped, I know not where to sit, but at last I make do with the spot on the floor that's haloed by thin noon light, fanning out my dress and sitting lower than my audience. This causes murmurs which I ignore. Now, I say, as brightly as I can muster, who will show me what to do? An old woman gestures, a loop of rope already in both hands. You pick it, ma'am. Take all the fibers apart, like this, see? She pulls the strands, adds them to the cloud by her feet. The women stir when I mimic the action, observing that my hands were not made for this work, that I'd best not ruin my fingers or I'll be sneered at by friends. Not friends at all if they mock me, I joke. And gradually, the mood of the room and the strangeness of the task is lightened by laughter. This is how they cope, I think, for there is sisterhood in this terrible prison, palpable as the wet brick walls and skittering rats. What brought you here? A pregnant girl asks, and I say that I want to help them in any way that I can, even if only to assist in reaching their daily 4 pounds of oakum required by the matron. But then my mind floods with Eva, each woman's face a palimpsest of hers in reefs of shade, and the true purpose of my visit unfolds. If born under a different star, my daughter might have found her way into this shed, into these lives, these pathways, these tendrils of two-used rope. I tell them about her, and I say that I undo this rope because I cannot undo her death, as I will undo all injustices that are within my reach. And we are all crying and silent, and I pick the umbilical shape in my lap, as though this black rope might lead me back to her, as though I'll find her at the end. And I think it's maybe fitting to end a poem on Hymn to be Sung Underwater, which is this one. Hymn to be Sung Underwater. Earth, our mother, life giver, not home, but host, protector, archangel, nurturer of eye, soul, lungs, the mercurial human heart. Each structure of life calls you ovum, womb, nucleus, cell, both tomb and spring, old love, last port, faithful vessel, forgive our short shrift, O finite gift.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Beautiful. A couple of questions. Right. Do we have any from the chat? I don't think maybe we were asking for the chat, but have a look. Sarah, can you have a look and tell me if there are any from the chat? But anyway, I have a question. The Arctic, you said you went there a couple of times. Were you on a ship, or can you talk about the Arctic a little bit? Or
I'd love to. So this I was writing, I'm a novelist as well, which some of you might know. And I got Arts Council funding, which was really good, to research a novel that was set in Norway called The Nesting. And I made a few trips. I made a couple of trips to Oslo to interview someone who worked at one of the co-directors at Nordic Architecture, because the book involved architecture in Norway. And then I went on a ship. It was a ferry, but not like our ferries. It wasn't a cruise ship either, but it was it was a very nice ferry that took me right from Bergen up to the Russian border and back down again, which was just incredible. And I did stop off at a few places and tried to chat to as many of the people that lived there. One of the places we went in Finnmark, we went to Skarsvåg, which was a tiny little fishing town. And this was December, so it was pitch black all the time, basically, except for 2 hours a day. There would be very, very weak light, like dusk. But we went to this Arctic fishing town where there were 60 people. And we asked them about, had they perceived climate change? And they were like, yeah, and told us at length what that was like. So yeah, it just was, I think it was quite profound being there, being in the Arctic, being in a place that, these changes are not, they're so visible to the people that live there. And to be honest, there was times that I was writing this book that I thought, I don't know if, things are so dire that I don't know if the book will ever even be published, because we seem to be in such a state of utter crisis. And we still are, even after COP26, it's still really, there's no other word but alarming. So
I think people of my generation tried to address this back in the day, but now it seems so many more people, so many more younger people are interested and willing to go ahead and optimistic about what can be achieved. I think that's something to be said. It won't be us. It'll be like the next generation, won't it? It'll be youngsters. We've got to have faith in them as well. Right. Also, how did you come across Josephine Butler, who's a very interesting character?
Yeah, I think I was introduced to her by a former colleague. I lived for a long time in the northeast of England, about 16 years, and then I moved to Glasgow. And, I lived very close to Corbridge, and I would go to Corbridge in Northumberland often, and that's where Josephine Butler was born. And I think a colleague introduced me to her. And, I think if anyone reads about her, you're sort of shocked that we don't know more about her. I mean, I know, yes, there's a college in Durham that's named after her, and I think there's an Oxford college named after her. So there are these kind of efforts, but I can't get over that we don't know more about her. I went to the Glasgow Women's Library, where they have an archive of the court papers and transcripts that from her trial, and she was so articulate, and she was a writer, and she was just brilliant. So I just I just felt a sort of duty to, I don't know, to try and capture some of what she did in this small way. But I think we owe her a huge debt.
Very impressive character. Very moving poems about her as well. Can I ask you one more thing? There's a poem that I particularly like. Will you read it for me? I should have asked earlier, but it's called Willows, Lilo, and Dave. It's on page 43. And I just think it's just a beautiful poem about having an imaginary friend. And it's full of love and hope.
Yes.
Please read that for me.
We do also have some questions come through in the chat, so maybe after the poem, just one or two that have come through.
Yeah, so Willow is my daughter. She's the one who was diagnosed with autism, and she's amazing. She's this amazing child, and so my learning about autism has been a huge journey, because, as I said, I didn't know anything about autism at the beginning at all. And she was diagnosed at a time that, although I think there's a lot more talked about in the media and so on, there wasn't that much then. And I was only, she was given the diagnosis and we were kind of just left to figure it out. There was no kind of support after that. But so my journey was quite profound, because I started thinking, oh my gosh, so what is this because she was nonverbal then. And I thought, is she ever going to speak? How is this going to affect her as a parent? You have all these fears, but actually she's just amazing. And, you know, it's not that she has autism, she's autistic. And I actually think in a lot of ways, she's not held back by this at all. This is something really that we don't understand. And I just think it's, she's just tremendous. So this poem tries to, I suppose, grapple with how I had to, you know, very slowly reconfigure what I had known or not known about her condition. It's not even a condition, it's just her. Willow's Lilo and Dave. The fish is blue and invisible. His name is Lilo. Lilo has backstory. His parents are missing and he has to find them. Until then, our daughter is looking after him. He lives in a bowl filled with water. The bowl is also invisible, and mostly she carries it around in cupped hands. And at night, she'll set it beside the bed. We try to trick her by asking, "Where's Lilo?" And she always remembers where she left him. When she eats or plays, she gives Lilo to us for safekeeping. Luckily, his bowl fits in a trouser pocket, though she'll check to make sure the bowl is all the way inside. At school, she started a craze for imaginary fish. All her friends suddenly have imaginary fish. This time last year, the pediatrician said Willow didn't engage in imaginary play, and this was a key reason for her diagnosis. Now Lilo has a friend called Dave, another fish. He has backstory. We help her carry them around.
So there's just two questions from the chat, which I'm just going to put to you before we go on to the final reader. So Jen asks, does Caroline process those climate anxieties through her poems, or is it a different kind of relationship between the emotion and the art?
Oh, what a great question, Jen. I think it is. I think I was processing climate anxieties, but I fear that a lot. I have a lot of anger as well as anxieties. I think we all do. There's so many different levels in which I'm angry. One of them is, I suppose, that we're all being told to wash our clothes at 30 degrees and recycle and do all these things, which, you know, I think a lot of us are doing, but it's shifting the blame and the onus. There's real change needed at the corporate level. So yeah, I think anxieties and anger are definitely there, but I also try to educate myself and maybe, bring a bit of, I like the science behind it. I think that there's a wealth of information out there that, we need to sort of prioritize. And I tried to make sure that any learning I did was embedded in the poems. For instance, I became very fascinated with the tardigrade, this little water bear thing that, will apparently outlive us all. And that, in a strange way, gave me a bit of hope. So.
Great. And then this other one, the last one I'll put to you before we go on, is this is from Rebecca. In your current poetry book, We Have to Leave the Earth, which poem proved the most inspiring to you and why?
Oh, thank you. That's a hard one. I think because I wrote this over 7 years. I obviously wrote it very slowly, but there was a lot of thinking and a lot of change. And I think there's a poem in there called Peeling the Skin that I found it sort of was one of those poems that just sort of came out of nowhere. And it's very much about my relationship with my family and sort of realizing that, you don't have to follow a certain path, that you can make your own choices. So yeah, that was quite an important poem to me. And I was really pleased with it. It almost was like one of those poems that felt like a gift.
Thank you. Amy.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, audience, for the nice questions. Right, our final poet this evening is Liz Berry. Hello, Liz. She's an award-winning poet from the Black Country. Her collections are The Black Country from Chatto in 2014, and The Republic of Motherhood from Chatto in 2018, and The Dereliction, quite recently from Hercules Editions, 2021. And I think she just said she's working on a new one, so we'll look forward to hearing some poems from Liz Berry. Hello, Liz.
Oh, evening, everybody. Thank you so much for a beautiful evening of poems so far, and so many congratulations. Look, I'm going to wave this beautiful book around, and if you haven't got a copy already, then you must. It's a real treasure. So I'm just going to read 4 poems to finish the evening off. Some of the poems I've enjoyed of Carolyn's most in the past have been these beautiful poems that explore motherhood and anxiety and the earth. I remember sitting in a hospital car park waiting for a scan, reading, writing motherhood and thinking, thank God I'm not alone in this. I've got other poets with me. So I'm going to start with a poem called Highbury Park. It's about this really beautiful wild park near where I live in Birmingham, and about that strange time with your body after you've given birth. Highbury Park. In the woods at night, men are fucking amongst the gorgeous pinatas of the rhododendrons, the avenue of cool limes. By day, I walk my son down the secret pathways, smell the salt rime of sex on the wind, a condom glowing with blossomy cum, knotted and flung. I bury it gently under the moss with my boots. I envy them, these lovers. Dark pines beneath their knees, the tarry earth opaline with the desire paths of snails, fallen feathers in the dirt like warnings. I know those days of aching to be touched by no one who knows you. After he was born, I wanted nothing but the wind to hold me, the soft-mouthed breeze coaxing my skin like the grass from a trampled field. How heavenly it seemed then. Light shafting emerald through wounded leaves, the woods a church, we its worshippers. And all that sex, freed from love and duty, like being taken by the wind, swept from the cloistered rooms of your life, stripped and blown, then jilted, dazzling in the arms of the trees. This next poem is a sort of newish poem I wrote last year. It was that time when it felt like everyone and everything was falling apart, and I was spending a lot of time watering my plants and thinking, if only I could look after people in quite that same easy way. Tend. I want to lift everyone I love into the sunlight of my windowsill and tend to them like houseplants. Bathe their bodies with warmth, slake their thirst with a delicate atomizer. And if humidity is what they crave, carry them into the steamy bathroom and let the vapours heal them. Mom, Kathleen, Richard and his cats, my drunk sad neighbour with the cuts on his knuckles. Let them leave behind their sorrow and live as plants do, thinking only of nourishment, the lush suck of water shamelessly turning their faces to the sun. Let them close their eyes in contentment, knowing I am watching over them. Little mother, listening to their leaves for a sign. How beautiful they could be. My eldest son climbing green as an ivy. Declan, on day release, his scars are pink and emerald Fittonia. And in the centre, my father, sweet, failing maidenhair fern, his rackety lungs and sliding words. How his fronds might fan to feathers in my tending, green rising from the dark dead to curl as his hair did in the wet June woods. This next poem's a sort of a prayer poem. It's called Blue Heaven. I've just done a lovely project with a photographer from the Black Country. Once he sent me a photograph of a great piece of graffiti. It was a blue wall. And on it, someone had written really small in pencil, be happy with what you've got. And at first I thought, be happy with what you've got. What kind of message is that? And then I thought, oh, actually, it's a brilliant, beautiful message. Be happy with what you've got. So this is a sort of a poem in praise of those gorgeous, everyday, ordinary loves that we have. Blue Heaven. Our poem which art in blue heaven, give us this morning. Daffodils spilling spring song like yolk, moss sporing on the guttering, snug for wet the beds. Jenny Wren and weeping birch watching over us, our unanswered emails and half-built Lego palaces, milk cups and toast crumbs, photographs of us in the 90s, drunk and so in love we look like children. Give us griefs and small kindnesses. Once upon a time, in clumsy boy's hand on the back of a phone bill, library books and germaline, sanitary towels soaked with clotted rubies, pyjamas shed beneath the bunk beds like adder skins, money spiders, stories, the nights we touch in darkness with that wild honey milk of recognition, tenderise our hearts to all that is holy, the dog and a blanket, the playgroup collage, and forgive us our trespasses, pulling tight the shutters on our hearts when others are knocking, cussing in the night when we stumble to the cot. Teach us to love each other as the tree loves the rain, never wasting a drop. And I'll finish with a newer poem. The poem's called Godspeed. When we fuck in sweet darkness, I leave my body behind, rising from where smoke rises from the forging fire. Godspeed, I tell her, as we part like lovers on the threshold. I want to begin again, move as the creatures of the air do, birds, moths, ghosts shimmering in the empty streets, the theremin song of the trees as they shed their inhibitions against the gold light, the blood and dueling of the body, its grief and burden abandoned like an unreadable book. I wish I could take you with me, but one of us must stay behind, keep watch upon the darkness, our son's warm limbs reaching like tendrils from their cots. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Liz Berry. Wonderful to hear those poems. So hypnotic. Beautiful. And thank you, everybody else. Carolyn, for your lovely new book. Jen, for your beautiful new poems. Wow, fantastic to hear Jen Hadfield read her poems. Thanks to you all for coming. Do check out the links in the chat to buy the books. I think it was going to take me a while to recover now from the beautiful poems. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much to my colleague, Sarah, as well from Sarin. So we'll see you all again soon sometime. So take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.